Don't carry a Sig P320 or P365. You'll blow your nuts off. I'm not sure how true that really is. I've actually been pretty reluctant to do a video about the P320 issue, mainly just because so many other channels have already talked about it. Everybody's talked about it. And so I guess I do need to go there, but mainly because I've been seeing a lot of stuff lately saying the P320 and the P365. Is the P365 actually dangerous? I've been carrying this gun appendix for a long time on a daily basis. Am I in danger of shooting myself without pulling the trigger? I don't think so, and that's what today's video is about. So a quick aside about the P320, the gun that actually might be dangerous. So for a long time, I'm pretty involved in the gun community, the firearms community, both on YouTube and on Facebook, and I see a lot of what's going on. And the P320 has been in the news quite a bit again lately. First, it was with Sig saying, this ends today. And that just kind of put it all right up in everybody's face again. But you know what? For a long time, to be completely honest, I wasn't sure that the P320 was actually a faulty pistol that could fire without somebody pulling the trigger. I thought that, some things had maybe happened before their recall. And if you don't know, Sig did a recall at one point, changed their fire control group a little bit to fix the problem. Without admitting that there was a problem. It was a voluntary recall. Some people did it, some people didn't. I know people that carry P320s that never got the fix, and their P320s have been perfectly fine, and they trust them with their lives. Lots of law enforcement agencies, and including our own military, have used the P320, the M17, the M18. It is a very prolific pistol. When there's something that is out there in great numbers, well, there's more of a likelihood that there's going to be greater numbers of problems with something like that. But you don't want the problem to be that your firearm shoots without you pulling the trigger. Like I said, I think that this did happen, especially at the beginning before the fix, but I had it in my mind that maybe a lot of people that had had negligent discharges used the P320 as an excuse as to their negligent discharges, and that maybe a lot of this stuff wasn't really true. The more I've looked into it, and the more I've seen stuff even recently, and people that are pretty trustworthy people in the firearms community, I don't think they're lying. I do think it's happening. Now, I do think that there probably are also people that, that probably have had negligent discharges, and because it just happened to be with a P320, they thought that they could, blame the gun for that. I'm sure there is some of that, but I'm also pretty dang sure at this point that there are P320s that have gone off without people pulling the trigger, and that's not okay. Glock perfection, right? I mean, one thing about the Glock is the safe action system. You can drop a Glock, you can whatever. A Glock is not going to go off unless you pull the trigger, especially if it has stock OEM internals and no, upgrades to the trigger mechanism. And even most of the upgraded triggers are pretty dang safe these days. Thing is though, is I've been seeing memes and discussions on Facebook groups. A lot of people seem to think that the P365 is also a problem. And it's not. That's the thing. So like I said, I've been carrying this P365 for a long time. Appendix pointed right at parts of me that I do not want to get shot. Not that I want to get any part of me shot, but there's parts that I really don't want to get shot. And I wouldn't do that if I didn't think that this pistol, was safe. Now there are things about both the P320 and the P365 that are a little bit concerning, I guess. One of it being, this is a striker-fired gun with no external safety, no thumb safety, but also no trigger safety. Like a Glock, like an M&P, like most other striker-fired guns have a little trigger dingus here that has to be pressed for the trigger to be able to go back. If you don't press that, the trigger won't go. That is the safety on striker-fired guns. This video is sponsored by Venice AI. Do you ever wonder what ChatGPT does with your conversations? We all know that our phones, Alexa, everything like that, listens to our conversations and then advertises to us based on what we say. Well, what else are these things doing with our personal information? They're selling it to third parties, including governments. In fact, the director of the NSA, the former director, is now sitting on the board of ChatGPT, which is why I'm using Venice AI. Venice AI is an AI software. It uses open source software that you don't have to download. It goes straight to your web browser, but the biggest thing is that it's private and permissionless. And so you don't have to worry about them selling your information to anybody else, which is kind of why it's a big deal to me. I like privacy, even though I show everything that I do on a YouTube channel. My daughter, she's 13. She uses AI for all kinds of things these days. She's been writing stories with it. She's been making music with it. It is incredible what you can do with AI. It's a very powerful tool, but keep your privacy while you use it with Venice AI. I like the Pro plan personally. It just gives you a lot more that you can do, and you can get a 20% off on your Pro plan if you sign up using my link. That is venice.ai/sawtooth-tactical. Use that code to get 20% off. The code is sawtooth-tactical. Back to the trigger safety or lack thereof. The P320 and the P365 don't have a trigger safety. Now, is that a danger? Let me tell you what I consider the safety with the striker-fired gun. None of my striker-fired guns have external safeties. My single action only guns do, but not my striker-fired guns. And I'm totally comfortable with that. You know what the safety is? It's your holster. It's your holster and your trigger finger. If you have a good holster that covers the trigger guard and nothing can get in there to pull that trigger, that gun is safe. With a round chambered. I do not carry with an empty chamber. I always carry with a Federal HST 124 grain hollow point in the chamber of this pistol. I pull out my carry mags when I film videos because I want to be safe when I'm messing with guns in front of the camera. But what makes it safe is carrying it in a holster. And whenever my pistol has a round chambered, it is in a holster unless I'm at the range actively shooting the pistol. The other safety is your trigger finger. It stays up here unless you're ready to fire. That is when it comes on the trigger. If your pistol stays holstered when you're carrying it, a holster, a good Kydex holster that covers the trigger guard, and your finger stays off the trigger until you're ready to shoot, your pistol is safe, as long as it's not a P320. This video isn't so much about the P320 though, it's about the fact that people seem to think that the P365 is also dangerous. This is a totally different pistol design. And as far as I could tell, and I did research before making this video, I couldn't find a single instance of a P365 going off without somebody pulling the trigger. I think that this gun is totally safe. And if you are worried about it, if you have a P365, if you carry a P365, because the P365 and its variants, the XL here, the X Macro, even the Fuse, all these different, there's a lot, Sig does a lot of different SKUs of each of their firearms, especially their pistols. I believe you are totally safe. I've taken apart the fire control unit on this because I had the original tiny micro P365 originally, and I rebuilt it into what it is now with the Wilson Combat XL grip module. I got the X Macro slide with the comp and an optics cut, so I could put a Holosun EPS Carry on it, and a Streamlight TLR-7 Sub, and I even replaced the trigger bow, the trigger shoe I should say, with the flat-faced X series trigger because I like flat triggers. I put flat triggers in everything. I think flat triggers are better. But the point being that I've had to take apart the FCU in order to do that. I put it back together exactly the same way with the new trigger shoe and a new spring because it came with a new spring. And I actually got a slightly lighter trigger pull out of it. But it's still pretty much the same trigger pull. It is by no means a 1911 single action kind of trigger, but it's not a bad trigger for a striker-fired gun. Much, much better than Glock Perfection in my opinion. You have some take up here, but it's pretty smooth. A little bit of creep, but a fairly crisp break for a striker-fired gun and very consistent. I like this trigger. Do I think it's unsafe? I don't. Even without the trigger dingus, trigger safety. I think these guns are totally safe as long as you use safe practices like in a holster that covers the trigger guard when you have a round chambered, finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. As long as you do that, you should have no problem with your P365. And I'm going to continue to carry mine appendix with a round chambered, pointed right at the part of me that I don't want to get shot, and I'm not worried about it. I've never been worried about it. And I've seen some of these conversations in the Facebook groups of people that think that you're crazy if you carry a striker-fired SIG, whether it be a P320 or a P365. And I don't think you have anything to worry about if you're carrying a P365. Even if you're carrying a P320, the chances of something like that happening are very low, considering the millions of pistols that are out there. But the fact that it's happened multiple times and continues to happen, there was one very recently. I wouldn't carry a P320 appendix with a round chambered, but that's just me. If you do, and you've vetted your gun and you trust it and nothing has ever happened, then you're probably good. Probably. But even Sig just recently came out and said that they recommend that you carry the P320 on an empty chamber. That is not, I disagree. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with a P320 with a round chambered because of all that's going on, but you should carry, if you're carrying a firearm, you should have a round chambered. If you think that you're going to have time to draw from the holster, rack the pistol, and then engage a threat in a self-defense situation, and have the wherewithal to do that, as well as the time to do it, I mean, you might, but I don't want to take that chance. I want my pistol, and that's part of the reason that I don't have striker fired. None of my carry guns have an external thumb safety either. I don't want to have to think about any of that. If I have to use my gun in a self-defense situation, I want to be able to pull it and shoot it. And so, yeah, Sig saying that you're supposed to carry a P320 without a round in the chamber, to me, that's kind of an admission of the fact that they think that their gun does have a chance of going off in the holster. There's also another document I think they put out. I don't know if it's recent or not. I actually just read it today in preparation for this video. And they talk about, abuse of your firearm rendering the trigger system unsafe. And they talk about abuse such as multiple things, including dropping your gun. And that's a big thing that a lot of companies talk about their pistols being drop safe. As we know, Series 70 1911s, not drop safe. That's not a problem to me. I understand that they're not drop safe, and I try not to drop them. But it's also a very specific, it has to be dropped right on the muzzle so that there's inertia on the firing pin, because there's no firing pin blocking them. There is a firing pin block in a P320. It's a pistol that should be drop safe. And most modern pistols are designed to be drop safe. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't go out and try to drop my pistols, especially when they're loaded with a round in the chamber. Why take a risk like that if you don't have to? But At the same time, you should be confident in modern firearm technology. Like I said, 1911 notwithstanding, that's not really modern firearm technology. It's, over a 100-year-old design. Most modern guns are designed to be drop safe. Modern pistols, I should say. AR-15s have a floating firing pin too. Technically not drop safe. But at the same time, try not to drop your guns. But if you do, hopefully you don't get shot with them. And Sig is saying that, that their P320 might not be safe if it's dropped. Anyway, this video has gone on long enough. Point being, if you carry a P365, you have nothing to worry about. Keep carrying your P365. For those that think that the P320 and the P365 are somehow both not safe pistols, that's not the case. It's only the P320. It has a totally different design than the P365. The P365 fire control unit is like a milled piece of metal. The P320 is more like a stamped piece of metal, like an AK or an MP5, like the way that, it's a folded up piece of stamped steel to make the FCU. It's a totally different design than the P365. And as far as all of the research that I've done, your P365 is totally safe to carry with a round in the chamber. You have nothing to worry about. But let me know in the comments if you agree with me or not. Do you carry a P365? Do you carry it chambered? Do you carry it appendix? Do you trust it? Let me know. I would love to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like. Make sure you subscribe to Sawtooth Tactical. And from Sawtooth Tactical, stay strapped or get clapped.